it available to you on YouTube later this afternoon, so that if you really want to go home tonight and pop a little popcorn and sit on the couch with your significant other, or perhaps just watch it alone, throw it up on the big screen TV, and go through all this again, you'll definitely be able to do that. So, and by that same token, if someone else in the organization wanted to see this but couldn't make it, feel free to pass along the YouTube link. I'll make sure that you all get that. All right. So, Intacct CloudBytes Financial Statements 101. Now, before we really get started, the one thing I do want to point out is that on your screens, you should have a GoToWebinar control panel. Typically, that pops up either at the top or on the right-hand side. Depends on your operating system, sometimes Windows versus OS X. But in that, regardless of where it is, you should have a questions box. If at any point you have a question about what we're talking about, please feel free to punch it in. I will respond as soon as I can, as soon as I do see it. And I've got the questions box here on my machine so that I can see it almost instantaneously. And so if you have anything, please feel free to type it into there. I will see it and will respond. Everyone is on mute, so I am not able to hear you as you are there, and also cuts down on background noise, and you don't hear each other and things like that. So feel free to type the question in. I will respond. At the end of the presentation, I will open it up. So if you have any comments or questions, you're more than welcome to hold them to that point as well. Today's presentation will be about 50 minutes long. I have been told that these presentations do count as long as you attend this session. It does not count if you watch it on YouTube. But if you attend the session and you are a North Carolina CPA, that these sessions will count. So if you want to count an hour of credit for this, please let me know, and I'll send you over the official information saying that you attended and so forth that you can keep for your records. Okay? All right. So let's get started. To jump into the presentation today, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to throw up a poll. And I'm going to throw up polls, and I guess I shouldn't say throw up. I'm going to put out polls on a regular basis throughout the presentation. And if you would just answer that, that's kind of my way of making sure that you're paying attention. Also needs to be done in order to get the CPE credit for the presentation as well. So I'm going to launch this poll, and if you would just answer this for me real quick, I would appreciate it. Simple yes or no question. Have you edited an existing financial statement in Intacct? Okay. All right. So we're 100% voted here. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So it looks like we're about 2/3 have edited, 1/3 have not. And I know we've got varying degrees of experience on Intacct in this on this call, so that's great. And that's something to keep in mind as we get started. So I've got a few slides. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on slides. One, because I kind of ran out of time to do them. Two, because I really want to get into the actual application as opposed to just showing you a bunch of slides. So for those of you that don't know me, and I think you all do, so I guess I shouldn't really say that, but for anybody who's forgot who I am, Philip Massey, CPA, and I am doing your presentation today. Our agenda, introductions, really quick introductions. Then we're going to talk a little bit about financials in an overview. One of the things I want to do is to help you expand your thinking, because I do think the words financials inside of Intacct take on a whole new meaning than what they do inside other ERP or accounting applications. Then we're going to go through running financials, how you run them. We're going to go through designing financials, clicking on the edit button and what types of changes and things like that that you can make. And then I'll tell you about the next CloudByte webinar, which is September the 24th, and it is on creating custom reports in Intacct. So not financial statements, but custom reports. And we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Okay? So, introduction. If anyone has not seen me, that is not me. That is not an actual picture of me. Not too far gone, although most of my hair now is gray. But anyway, Massey Consulting, founded in 2002. We are comprised of CPAs and accountants. We have numerous technical certifications. We are a member of the Intacct Premier Partner Club, and since I can edit on the fly, I'm going to do that and say we also made Intacct President's Club for 2015. And I'll pause for a moment of silent accolades. Okay, so 2 years in a row, 2014 and 2015, members of Intacct President's Club. An Intacct Premier Partner is an organization that is graded on customer satisfaction, they're graded on sales, they're graded on service and support, they're graded on training, all the different aspects of being an Intacct partner. President's Club is strictly a sales goal, meeting certain sales requirements and whatnot gets you into the President's Club. So we're honored for both of those. And we are a Microsoft Silver partner for Dynamics ERP applications such as Great Plains. We've been ranked in the top 300 small businesses in the Southeast USA by the Biz Journal magazines, and we regularly contribute to NCA CPA blogs. Also about to be on the SCA CPA blog and other blog locations as well. Okay. Philip Massey, that's me. I was founded in 1970. It was a merger. We won't go into that. I have a BS in accounting. I am a CPA and have been a license holder in North Carolina since 1994. I'm certified in Intacct, Microsoft Dynamics GP, Microsoft SQL, and many other things as well. And in fact, my wife often tells me that I am certifiable. Guest speaker at Intacct events, and I am the one that does the blogging for NCA CPA and so forth. Okay. So all the boring stuff is pretty much done at this point. All right, so I'm going to minimize this little thing right here out of the way, and I have got a company open inside of Intacct, and this is Acme Healthcare. Acme is a healthcare organization. They have facilities all across the country where they treat different types of disorders. Acme is a company that previously ran on QuickBooks. They were pretty unhappy with the way that QuickBooks would do its financial reporting, and that was one of the main reasons that they moved over to the Intacct application. Acme has multiple entities, and QuickBooks is not good, does not do a good job with multiple companies, multiple entities with consolidated financial statements. And QuickBooks really only has one class type dimension, one dimension called class that they can use. Now they've got projects and things like that, but it didn't really give them the ability to do all of the reports that they need. So they made the decision and they moved over to the Intacct application. Like I said, one of the big reasons, certainly not the only one, but one of the big ones is the financial reporting that is available. Okay? So let's talk about the financial reporting that is built into Intacct. It's got kind of a nickname. It's called the Flex Report Writer because it's so flexible in writing financial reports. So Flex Report Writer. You can find it under General Ledger and Financial Reports. That will take you into the financial reports screen. Okay. Now I love this headline that they have in there right now from this summer release. Stop losing your head. So a little bit of humor there from the developers. It's good to see that they can write this code and put out these releases on a quarterly basis and still keep a sense of humor about themselves, although maybe that's the marketing department that put that in there. Either way, one of the nice improvements that I'll point out later as we're going through this is that when you view your financials in an HTML format now, the column headers stay at the top. So it's kind of like Excel when you freeze those rows at the top of an Excel sheet. Now Intacct does that. So you don't have to remember which of your columns is current year, which is last year, which is last month, which is next month, you know, that kind of thing. The system will keep that up at the top. I point that out because this is where you will see, and it's a little off topic, but this is where you'll see notes about these new releases. So always keep an eye when you pop into here and you see one of these things, you know, take a look at it, see what it says. It's typically new features. A lot of times there's videos that accompany these new features. And then when you're done with it, you can simply close, or if you don't have time to look at it now, you can view it later, right? So here's our financial reports list. Here's where we have all of the financials that are available within our company. Now, before we jump into how this list works, what I want to talk about is sort of the overview, and then the bullet point in our agenda that said think differently. What I mean by that is, as you all know, being on Intacct or purchasing Intacct and being in the midst of an implementation, one of the draws of the Intacct application is its dimensions. And a dimension is, as I've probably told each of you, it's a tag that can be applied to transactions. That's a simple way to look at it. So if you imagine your transaction is a box, and you want to put a label on it for a department, and you want to put a label on it for a project, and you want to put a label on it for a division, and then you set that box aside to where you can see those labels, those are dimensions on a transaction. And then you can gather all the boxes or all the transactions that are labeled for this project and all the transactions that are labeled or dimensionally tagged for this department, division, fund, program, grant, whatever you want to code them for. That's essentially what a division is, dimension is. So Intacct takes the traditional chart of account and breaks it up into separate pieces and makes each of those a different dimension. When I say that I want you to really think about this and expand your thinking, think differently about your financials, what I mean by that is that all of those dimensions flow all the way down to the general ledger. And you might say, well, you know what, Philip, what's the big deal? If you had a general ledger chart of accounts in the traditional format and you had 4000-100-200, they'd all be in the general ledger as well, and you could, you know, write reports, or you could do things about that. Well, that is true. That is true. But if you take, for example, the fact that you could take a class dimension, you could rename it as, let's say, event, for the events that you host in your organization. You could then put custom fields on that event dimension that would track type of event, sponsor of event, et cetera, et cetera. You could then create dimensional structures for use in your financials to where you could see one type of event versus another type of event versus another type of event versus another type of event. And you can see all of that in your financial statements. You could also take the example of a professional services organization that has different types of projects that they do for different types of organizations that they work for. They can create groupings for their financials to easily and dynamically get revenue, revenue by project, revenue by industry, revenue by project type, revenue by product line, whatever it may be, because all that information flows all the way down into the general ledger, you've got the ability to use any of your dimensions, double-digit number of dimensions here, any of those dimensions, to be able to twist and turn the data that's in your financial statements. So normally when you think about a revenue report, you might think, okay, let's go into sales order processing, or let's go into project accounting, wherever your billings come from. And you may think, oh, let's create a custom report inside of there that gives me that information. What I would challenge you to do is to do it inside financial reports, because, again, all of that information is down at the general ledger level. So you have a project code, you have a project dimension, that's at the general ledger level. That project dimension is associated with a project record. That project record can have custom fields. So you can easily create structures for your financials that have project type as a delimiter. And then Intacct will dynamically create a series of reports based on project type. Now take that to the next level for a multi-entity company, and the entity is the location dimension becomes the entity dimension. So therefore you can have side-by-side financials of your different entities. You can have one page per entity financials. You can have one page per location financials. So the ability to create reports inside the financial aspect of Intacct is fairly well unlimited with what it can do, because all of that information goes down to the general ledger level. Okay, so that's my challenge to you. Think differently about your financials. Try to come up with a way to write something inside the financials package, or if you're struggling with something, getting a piece of information or writing it in the custom report writer piece, then I would challenge you to think, can I get this information from the financial reports? My dimensions go down to the financial reports, so I kind of really ought to be able to. Revenue or cost numbers, expenses, any of those types of things can typically be garnered from a financial report, as opposed to just what you would think would be a standard sales order or purchase order type report. Okay. Again, if you guys have any questions, comments, anything like that, you're welcome to put something into the questions box, and I'll address it as soon as I can. Okay. So let's take a look here. Running financial statements inside of Intacct. So as I said, if we go to General Ledger and we go to Financial Reports, then that takes us to the screen that we're looking at here. This screen is a list of all of your different financials, all the ones you have access to anyway. And do note that there are 2 pages, so there's 29 total financial statements in this organization that they can run. So we can flip back and forth between pages here. Now, when I say run a financial, if we wanted to run this balance sheet report, typically what you would be looking to do is click here where it says HTML. You'll get another tab. You may get a few report prompts here if you wanted to narrow down what you're looking at, and then you'll be presented with the report. Now, a couple of things on here while I'm here. These buttons will allow you to collapse or expand what you're looking at. Pretty standard web functionality. You can drill in on the dollar amount, and it opened up on another screen, so I'll pull it up here. You can drill in on the dollar amount, and in this case, you're looking at this, you're looking at it basically a balance brought forward. There's your 2.8 million cash in bank. Here's your 2.8 million here. but it's a balance brought forward. So, you know, what good does that do me? That doesn't tell me much of anything. Instead of closing this and trying to find it somewhere else, keep in mind that you've got these buttons up here. So you can hit customize and you can change your view to current year. And then you can hit view again and it will reprocess this report. And I guess again, we have a balance brought forward. But you can come in here and do, we've got a start date and an end date. That's what it was. So let me take that out and then view. So balance brought forward as of 1/1/2015. So not a whole lot more help. But what I wanted to show you is that you do have these same buttons here at the top that you have when you start a general ledger report from the general ledger report screen. So you don't have to close this and go back somewhere else. You can pull that up or change your criteria. Now, just do be careful where you click. I clicked that time on the words accounts receivable. It actually brings up the GL account for accounts receivable, that setup screen. So it is different clicking here versus clicking here. But you can scroll through these, you can see, you can collapse all of these items to potentially have a more streamlined report. And when you see this into the screen, you've got this information. You can change your filters. That'll take you back to the parameters screen. I can print this to a PDF. I can shoot it out to Excel, or I can email it to someone. So any of these 4 buttons here will work after you've generated the report. If I hit email, for example, it's going to ask me who to email it to. I want to CC myself. Now, selecting report type, you can send it HTML, printable, which is a PDF, CSV, Excel, or text. So you've got those 5 choices. I can send it as an Excel file. I can put in a message and say OK. And I'll check my email here in a minute and show you what it looks like when it comes through. Okay. In fact, let's see. I'll open this up so that we can see, so that I can catch it when it does come through. All right. So, you know, traditionally that's the HTML format. Now, if I know I want it to go to Excel, I can simply click Excel here. I'll get another pop-up. I'll get this report prompt again. I can say OK, and then please click here for download. And this is going to prompt me to open it with Excel or save it. And then I'll just bring this up here on the screen so you can see here what it looks like when it comes out. You've got the headers up at the top. You've got all the columns, the numbers, the underscores, all those things. So it comes out the exact same way that you see it on the screen. Okay. Same thing for CSV. It would spit it out in a CSV format. It would be, you know, all the columns would be lined up. And then you'd be able to manipulate the data if you needed to for whatever reason, or import it in, into another system, whatever your needs would be from a CSV standpoint. PDF would, of course, print it to a PDF, give you a hard copy. We get our prompt box again. We say OK. And now it's going to generate just a PDF, which this would be something you could then send to the bank or whatever your needs were for the PDF copy. Okay. All right. And then there's a couple of other things. The first one I'll point out to you is process and store. So let's say I want to process and store this balance sheet. Pick a date to run the report. I'm going to run it today. Do I want to pick a particular facility, which is one of my dimensions? Do I want to pick a particular department? Again, one of my dimensions. And then an as of date. So if we're going to run this as of 7/31, now I can store this in Intacct. And where this is going to wind up at is it's going to wind up over here underneath the Reports tab. you'll actually see a My Stored Reports choice under the Reports tab, and then you'll have this report as one of the ones that you can open. I do want to point out that you can store this in other cloud repositories. Amazon, I believe, is available. Don't shoot me if it's not. I believe Amazon Web Services is available. But in addition to that, there's Dropbox and Google Drive. So you can set up a connection to a particular account. So I'm going to see what we have here. Yes. So there's HTTP, if you've got something custom set up for your organization, Dropbox, Google Drive, Box.com, and Amazon S3. So you can send it really to those last four are predefined services. The top one is something that your web developer may build if you wanted to publish the report out so that all of your restaurant locations or all of your facilities could pull them off of an HTTP site from there. So if I wanted to set up a Dropbox connection, for example, I'd put that in. I put the owner, the email address, storage path defaults, and then it's going to ask me to authenticate to Dropbox if I were to try to save this. Same thing with Google Drive and so forth. So important thing here is that you can store it in the cloud if you want to push it to Dropbox or Google Drive or Box or something of that nature. Okay? And again, you've got the ability to pick the type of report that it turns into. If you want to store it in Intacct, I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to say OK here, and then it says the report's being processed. Check my stored reports for the report results. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. We'll give it some time to generate the report and make sure that it's able to put it out of the reports window. Okay. So as you can see, balance sheets, cash flow statements, G&A expenses, actual versus budget. So, you can pull budget into this, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Income statements, of course, you can do income statements, summary or detail. And I think we had a few more over here. So here's indirect spend. So again, keep in mind, look at this one at the bottom. Top 10 customers, residential, commercial. So think about that. That's top 10 customers based on sales volume, and you're pulling that out of the financial reports. That again goes back to the fact that all of this data is pulled down to the general ledger level within Intacct so that you can have greater reporting flexibility. Okay? And I just got the report that I had sent to myself, so I am going to push this out to a separate screen here, and I'll pull this over so that you can see it. So here's the email. That's the message that I typed in. Intacct didn't do that by default. This is, here's Intacct's little tagline that they put in. And then here's my balance sheet. So I can click on it and I can see, and again, I had consolidated all the lines on that screen, so it sent me exactly what I had on that screen. Okay. Whatever you're looking at on the screen when you send it is what it's going to send. Okay. So again, top 10 customers, residential, commercial, sales by entity, indirect spend reports. These are things that not necessarily are going to wind up being thought of as financial statements. Certainly top 10 customers, residential and commercial. Those are not being thought of as financial statements necessarily. We've got one client where they have unearned revenue, and we have written financial reports inside of this financial report writer in Intacct for them that take into account what the original contract was for the project, what they billed thus far, what number they put in for percentage of complete on the project, and it calculates how much of that unearned revenue they need to recognize. So things that you wouldn't potentially think of as traditional financial statements, income statements, balance sheets, cash flows, things like that, are doable inside of Intacct because of its flexibility. Okay? All right, so we can run them with all these little buttons over here. Oh, and the one that I haven't done and talked about, and I don't really truthfully put a lot of stock in this from a traditional financial statement standpoint. But then again, if you create statements in here or reports in here that aren't traditional, this may work for you. This schedule capability allows you to come in and pick a financial report and then schedule this financial report to run. So you'd come in here and you might put something like you want to run it start on the 5th of the month. You want to run it every month. You want it to be dated, that month, the 31st of the prior month or something like that. How often it recurs. And then down here, do you want to deliver it via email? Do you want to store it in Intacct? Or do you want to store it, do you want to store it in the cloud? And that's important to note. You can do all three of these. You can have it, email it to someone, save it in my stored reports in Intacct, and send a copy of it to Dropbox. So these are not exclusive. You can pick and choose from those or do all of them. So again, balance sheets and income statements, I couldn't see those really being scheduled, but top 10 customers, I could see that potentially going out once a month, maybe to salespeople to let them know who the top customers are. Okay. All right, so let's jump in here and let's edit a financial statement. So I think I've got one additional poll here. Okay, yes. One second, all right, it's being a little finicky there. All right, let me launch this out. So if you would take just a moment and answer this poll question for me. And if you've edited financials, if you've edited any types of custom reports, anything like that, just want to kind of know that. All right, perfect. Okay, so let's close that poll up. Let's share the results. So looks like we've got a good amount of experience in editing financials. But certainly the folks that haven't, it's not a one-person shop where they haven't done this before, so you're not alone. And we're getting ready to jump into it here with Intacct, and Intacct is a little bit different anyway. All right? So first of all, if it's a existing financial statement, such as our good old balance, actually let's go down to our income statement here. If we do an income statement by department, oh, and notice that, income statement detail by customer. That's pretty good. Income statement detail by department, if I edit it, then it comes in here and it shows me all the different tabs that I have access to that I can make changes for. So this page is pretty hard-coded. The only thing I can do is either change the name of the report or make it inactive. Rows. Rows here are controlled by your account group. And I want to take you through this as far as editing goes, and then I'm going to come back and create one from scratch and probably explain it a little bit better for you. But you've got rows, and rows are controlled by groups, whether they're account groups or dimension groups. And then you build your columns, and your columns can have various different column types, whether they're names or numbers or amounts or budgets or calculations, variances, things like that. You can have columns, as many columns as you want. Just whatever will fit on a page or two is typically the only consideration there. Computations, you can go in and create complex computations in the system, and then these computations are used, and there's very good diagrams here. These computations can be used inside your column setup. filters, one of the key things that I'm going to point out right here is this column that says prompt, as well as this piece right here that says prompt. So when I run a report, when I ran those other reports, it prompted me for three things: date, department, and facility. Date, department, and facility. And that's why I got prompted for those. Right. The other big thing on this page is right here. So for these two fields, these two dimensions, department and facility, and by default, it's department and location. Those are considered the two super dimensions. For those two dimensions, you can run individual reports. So in other words, if you have 8 facilities, you would get 8 reports, plus potentially a summary report if you wanted that as well. Okay. And we'll come back to all the fields as I build a new one. Format, you can change things like numbers, you can change things like fonts, you can change things like the titles and so forth in here, how the rows and totals are set up in the system, when does it do the underlines, et cetera, et cetera. The thing to caution you with here, or the hint to give you here, is that you are actually putting like an underscore, for example. If you're putting a double underscore under net income, you're going to put it on the net income line. So you're actually putting, this is going to create a net income or loss total based on this line, and it's going to put it at the bottom, but it's actually, the grouping levels show the headers. So you're working with what might look like a header, but it's actually going to put that net income loss total at the bottom. It's a little different to get used to as far as setting up these types of formats, but this is simply saying that at the point in which I create a total, because this is total formatting, at the point in which I create a total for net income and loss, I want 2 underscores. Gross profit, I want 1. General and administrative costs, I want 1. Sales and cost of sales, none. So you're telling it here where to put these. You're also saying, do I want any blank lines above? Page breaks. So here's where you'd get a page break between assets and liabilities and equity if you wanted to do that for your balance sheet to be on 2 separate pages. Okay. Permissions, you can grant permissions to folks. You can set everyone up to be denied and then give people access to it, or you can set everyone up to get to it and exclude certain folks. The one key thing here is this group must exist somewhere. So if I hit remove, I'm going to get a message that says that this will be moved to the exclusion list. That means that no one right now can get to this report. Nobody. If I were to come back in here and pick a user to be able to add to it, then here, for example, Joanna Drake would be able to, whoops, did that wrong. Joanna Drake would be able to get to that report, and she would be the only person that could get to that report. Okay. All right, so let's talk about creating one from scratch. So I'm going to hit cancel, and then I'm just going to hit add. And we're going to create a income statement, actual, budget, year to date, last year to date. Okay. All right. So that's going to be my title. We're going to make the report active. Now, one thing, I want you to watch this window. So one of the keys on this particular screen is, do you want to use accounts in your rows, or do you want to use dimensions? So you see that flip back and forth between those. With it being on dimensions, I now have customers, and here's revenue and expenses. So here again is one of those ways of thinking a little bit differently about your financials. Maybe it's your locations. Maybe it's your customers, your vendors, your items, your product lines. Maybe it's a grouping of customers based on their geographic location. Anything like that. You know, stuff like that traditionally comes out of a custom report writer, but you can get that out of Intacct through the financial report writer and get it pretty easily. You can also filter by account group on rows if you have the dimensions lit up so that I'm looking at a downtown location. Here's revenue, here's expenses on the rows, and then here's prior month and current year to date in the columns. So you've got time periods here, and you've got a combination of the dimension and account groups in the rows. If I go back to accounts, then I can filter by dimension structure. So here's revenue, and here's my customers or projects or whatever it may be. And then here's expenses, and here's my projects or vendors or whatever it might be in that particular list. So projects would be a good example of that. Events would be a good example of that. Locations would be a good example of that. So there are a lot of things that can be done within this report structure right here on this first page to get you a very, very flexible financial statement or report, period. Okay, so let's talk about groups. And if you'll pardon me just a second here, I'm going to pull this out and create a second connection to Intacct. By the way, for those of you that did not know that you could do that, I'm in Firefox. This works in Chrome as well. You can do it in Internet Explorer, but I'm not exactly sure how to do it. Thankfully, I've been on a Mac for about 3 years now and don't have Internet Explorer, so my internet browsing works. But here I'm just dragging this little icon for the lock, and I drop it up here, and it opens up another tab. So that gives me multiple tabs into the Intacct application. And I'm not logged in multiple times. I'm not taking up multiple user licenses or anything like that. This way I can move back and forth between windows. So what I did that for was I wanted to come over here and talk with you for a moment about a concept called groups. Okay, and there's a couple of different types of groups. One, first and foremost, is an account group. And an account group is a set of accounts. Think of an account group as cash and cash equivalents. Think of an account group as revenue. Think of an account group as current assets, current liabilities. If I go in and take a look at current assets, then I'm going to see current assets has a normal balance of debit in that group, and it is accounts 1000 through 14999 or 1499. Okay, so there's a number of ways that you can create these account groups. Now, what I typically tell folks to do is to try to make this as dynamic as possible. So if you're adding an account group, one of the really nice ways of doing this is to use the, hold on one second, let me give it a name here. This is my cash and cash equivalents. Okay. So structure type here this should give me, and I'm not sure why it's not. It should give me the choice here for category to where I can pick a particular account category, and I'm not sure why that's not in this list. And that's actually the way that I would recommend doing it. Each of the general ledger account numbers that you create, if I pull up my third window here, each of these account numbers is going to have a category associated with it. It's going to have a category associated with it. And, account categories are not turned on in this company. I apologize for that. All right, it's going to be I do have another entity over here that I can show you that I'm pretty sure does have the categories, and I apologize for jumping back and forth like that, but I would like to show you this. If I can get this to come up. Yes. And that wasn't in this one? No? Well, it's the first time I've seen that. Okay. Category. So here you have these different categories. So when you create a general ledger account, you put an account in a category. You can then take that category and use the categories, as long as they're enabled, to create your groups. All right? And think of groups as being stackable. So if we go back to this main list here, assets is comprised of a group of account groups. So that means that assets is made up of other account groups. And if I look at this assets group, it has current assets, fixed assets, and other assets. Okay? So what you do is you begin at the lowest level and create these groups, or use groups that come with the system, either way you want to do it. Most of the time, we somewhat recommend that you create your own, and then because that's easier to create your own financials that way and know that you've got them laid out the right way. But it's totally up to you. Either way, if the existing ones will work, then by all means, have at it. But you start at the bottom, you work your way up creating those groups, and eventually you get up to a group that could be called assets. You get up to a group that could be called net income. Underneath net income, there may be revenue group combined with a cost of sales group, or there may be a net income that has a gross profit group, which that gross profit group has a revenue and a cost of sales group in it. So you build those groups, and then the groupings are what you use in your financials. So if, for example, I were to come over here to select account groups, and I go down to net income and include that in the report, I've just included one account group in this report. However, that account group is made up of numerous other account groups. Actually, you know what? I picked the incorrect one. I should have picked, and I just went over this yesterday, so I should remember this, but I should have picked net income loss. So let me show you that one. Sorry about that. Net income loss, and notice that it comes up, and here's gross profit, here's sales, cost of sales, and general administrative. So I just picked the one, but I got all of these pieces. Okay. Now, once I'm in this screen, I can do a few things once I've picked my account group. First of all, I can have multiple account groups in here. So if I wanted to create a sales account group and bring that in, and then bring in a cost of sales group under it, you know, et cetera, I could do that inside the setup of this particular financial. I tend to like it more when you have the one large overarching account group and everything is inside of that. Okay, so running a little bit short on time, but once I'm in here, I can click on this, and then I can view what's in the account group, so I can check my accounts if I need to. I can also consolidate how the financial looks. So remember in that screen when we ran it, I clicked on a button and that summarized everything. I can do that here by default, and when it runs, it will come out in a summary mode by default. And if you'll notice, when I click here, it changes what's in the detail level. Okay. So you've got your account groups in the system. You can pull these in. Now, if you'd pick dimensions on that report info page, you would see dimension groups as well that you would be able to bring into here. So groups of locations, groups of facilities, groups of those groups. And if you're if you're in the area of that, like accounts receivable, for example, where you see customers, you've also got customer groups. So you can come over here and create customer groups. You can come over here and create project groups because projects are considered part of accounts receivable. So you can come over here and create those groups. And I can show you really quickly on a customer group, for example. If you come over here and one of the super nice things about Intacct is that if I wanted to get all of my Illinois customers, for example, and pull them in, then I could come down here and I could say where the bill to contact state equals Illinois. So that dynamically, anytime I add a customer and they have a value of IL in that block, they will be pulled into that group and then subsequently pulled into any report that includes that group in the report. So any field you create, whether it's whether it's a custom field you've created or one that comes with the system, can be used in that type of logic. Okay. So column names, a couple of things here, and I do apologize, running kind of short on time. You can pick a number of different types of columns: budgets, variances, differences, computations, actual amounts, names, numbers, remaining budgets, percentages, things like that. You can pick those. And then you've got the ability here, one of the key pieces, if you're looking at actual numbers, you've got the ability here to pull your time periods. And if you want current month, if you want current year, if you want current year to date, current year through current month, current quarter, or you've also in Intacct got the ability to create reporting periods. So if you wanted to create your own reporting periods that don't necessarily coincide with your actual company fiscal year, you could do that as well. If you just wanted to hard code them out here for some reason, you could do that as well. Okay. There are a lot of predefined choices, everything from trailing 1 year to trailing 4 quarters, prior year, current year, quarters, months, all of those types of things. And you can also do offsets. So if you wanted to say current month back 1 period, that would be the previous month. 2 periods, of course, would be 2 months prior. Now, here's where you can get these dimensional structures inside the columns themselves. So if you wanted to see a financial statement with 1 column for each of your different programs, you could come in and you would create your groupings and structures inside the Intacct application, and then you would be able to come over into the columns and pick a dimensional structure. So if I pick facilities, for example, in this case, and I want to look at all of the facilities in the Carolinas for Acme Healthcare, I can say OK, and then that's going to pull into this column all of the facilities that have been tagged as being in the Carolinas. And that's done through a facility group, like we talked about. I can also expand this. If I want to expand this based on the dimensional structure value, and I can go 1 level down or all levels. What that will do, notice that this changes up here. This was just added, so this means it's expanding based on the dimensional structure. So you're going to get 1 column per facility. So there may be 6 facilities in the Carolinas. You would get 6 columns in here. You may have 6 different programs that you have within a program group, and those 6 programs will go within here. And they'll be created dynamically based on the fact that they have transaction volume in them. So if you have one of your locations that you don't have any transactions in for the current month or the current period or whatever you've chosen here, it will not produce a column for that one. So it does it dynamically. In interest of time, I'm going to skip down here just again and kind of hit the filters. So again, keep in mind, you know, you've got the prompt choice here. You've got the run individual reports here. This also controls whether or not you include subs in your dimensional filters. So if you've got if you pick a department or if you pick a facility here and you pick South Carolina or something of that nature within one of your groups, then do you want to include all of the subs underneath South Carolina, or do you just want to see a total for South Carolina? And that same logic would apply if you prompted for it and they picked it when the report was ran. Do you want to include subs? One hint I'll give you here too is that typically in production reports, I don't put a value in here and it's just left it today. And when you prompt for it, then you can pick the day that you're looking for. Formatting, one of the bigger things here is going to be in the rows and totals. So just how you set up these different rows and totals and your underscores, blank spaces, formatting those financial statements so that they look right on the screen. And do keep in mind, if you can condense the report and expand the report for the values that you see, this doesn't change just because you've hidden it or expanded it or what have you. So sometimes it's a little better to create the summary report and the detailed report if you're concerned with how these underlying totals look in the system. But that's where you would control it. Okay. Okay, so we are at 3 p.m. according to my clock, and that is the end of our time. Wound up going a little bit faster, so maybe I'll try to put one together. Again, that's Financial Statements 201, where we can go a little bit more in depth into what all of these different choices are here. But wanted to give you all kind of a 101 level introduction into the financial statements, a little bit of information on how to edit those financials and how to create financials from scratch, and give you just a little bit better understanding of the financial aspect of Intacct. To me, it is far and away the most powerful financial report writer package that I have seen, or it's got the potential to be anyway. A lot of it is dependent upon how your system is set up, what kind of goals you want to have with that, and making sure that those two things are aligned. Okay? So our next CloudBytes session is going to be September the 24th, 2015 at 2 p.m. It's going to be on custom reporting and Intacct. Invitations will go out shortly. You can check our website, the Massey Cloud website, masseycloud.com, Intacct Training CloudBytes. You can also get to it from the events menu at the top of the page if you want to check and see what's coming up. And I'll try to keep that page a little bit more updated than it has been in the past. Okay? So if I haven't seen any questions come through yet, if anyone has a question, let me know and I can open up the lines here. Otherwise, I will probably just move along to the thank you screen, and I see 3 individuals that have stuck through the entire process, the entire webinar, beginning to end, and I will note these 3 and will be sending out Starbucks gift cards to Joel, Coley, and Lee. So you guys will have Starbucks gift cards in your e-gift cards in your inbox very soon. I do appreciate you staying and making it all the way to the end. And tell the folks, coworkers that didn't stay all the way to the end that they missed out on it because they weren't here on the thank you screen. So But I do thank you. I appreciate you all for your offering me your attention for this time frame. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that, you know how to get in touch with me. We're always here.